Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are waiting, as I understand, for some people to come trickling in. So I'll do a little bit of stalling, and then we can get set off. But I can stall by introducing myself. Hello, my name is Ian Harkins. I have been working with Apple Ruth for an embarrassingly long time. I'm going on 11 years now. I've in that time I have done a bunch of SAT, ACT, but as well, like what I really like doing are the AP tests. My particular expertise is the history and the political science AP tests. And with me is my colleague Jesse Anderson Lehman. Jesse, you're a grown adult. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yep. So I'm Jesse Anderson Lehman, and similarly, I've been at Upward for a long time. I just hit my 10-year anniversary, so I've been with the company for a decade. Also working with a bunch of standardized tests: SAT, ACT, GRE, you name it. But on the AP side of things, my focus is more on the STEM APs, so AP Calculus, AP Statistics, AP Chemistry, AP Physics. I'm also a full-time math teacher at a high school here in Atlanta, so math and science all the way. Though my trajectory was a little interesting, which maybe may come up over the course of this. But yeah, happy to be here.
And rest assured, you have two turbo nerds guiding you through inside the APs here. Two self professed and proud turbo nerds. So tonight, what I hope that we can get out of this is a little bit of introduction for how we approach the APs, how we recommend that our students, our clients, start to approach the APs. What are some burning questions that we come across at this stage quite frequently? What we can recommend, what we can do to help you out. There will be time at the end for a Q&A. So if there's anything more specific, I might try to answer some, and I might try to see if we can communicate more after this. After this is done, this does not have to be the end of the conversation by any means. It can be the beginning. We are Apple Ruth. We are building better learners for life. Our why very much is that when you change students' self-belief, you can change their lives, not just academically, but them as entire people. How on earth do we do this? We do this through our three pillars: academic tutoring, test prep, and executive function coaching. It's that test prep that I want to hone in on for today as we begin to discuss the APs. And I'd like to begin that discussion by a very common question that we get. Help! I'm not taking enough, or I'm taking too many APs. Now what? Um, no matter where you are in your high school career, it's not a bad time to start grappling with the APs. So I want to come in first off with a thesis that I really want to drive home for everybody. I don't think there's any admissions officer or college counselor, not even anybody here at Apple Ruth who specializes in test prep. I don't think that there's anybody who's going to say that the APs will serve as a substitute for a really excellent grade that demonstrates a semester-long effort in a class. You want to be honing in on subjects that you can demonstrate, hey, I have gone to an exceptionally high level, as high as I can, given my course offerings in my school. I really have an earnest desire to study STEM engineering. I met this man, Jesse Anderson Lehman. He seemed real cool and really into STEM, and I want to be like him. Please believe me, college and university, when I say that I am interested in STEM, in engineering, in studying history. Now you can start to use APs and AP classes to build that narrative when you say, like, hey, I really like these subjects, or some of you might even already know, I really want to study this. the AP courses and submitting an AP test to a college or university in the application process can really help to build that narrative. So first think of that whenever you're thinking, am I not taking enough? Am I taking too many APs? Ask yourself what is the narrative that you want to build? Are you demonstrating that you are going as far as you can in different courses in subjects that interest you? You know, do you have to take AP French if you really want to major in engineering? No, not necessarily. Do not feel forced or obligated to take every single AP that your school can offer. Neither Jesse nor I did when we were applying, not, it feels like not terribly long ago. Um, these are tools. They are meant to supplement your GPA, your high school transcript, and the narrative that you want to build for yourself. Jesse, do you agree with me, or have I got? Or do you want to come in and hot take, say I've got it completely wrong?
No, no, I think Ian's exact. I think you're exactly right. Yeah, I mean, it's. I also, when I talk to my students about this, I also speak of it as a narrative or as signaling that when you make decisions about which courses you take, and this applies to all of your course load in high school, but especially with something specialized like the like the AP courses, yeah, you're signaling to universities what you're interested in. You're signaling where your strengths are, and you're doing your best to find a way to communicate. Like, I'm interested in this. I can be committed to this. I can be committed to this type of work for 4 years, which is really what colleges are looking for when they accept you. And there's like competing factors, right? I think that that's number one is the signals and the narrative that you're sending out. um, but there's a whole bunch of other things that work into the decision of how many APs you take. I mean, one is like Ian said, like how many are offered at your school. So I want to make sure to address like there's like a very common anxiety. There's a lot of students who are like, well, wait a minute, my school only has 3 or 4 APs that I can really take. Like, I'm looking up Reddit posts where people are talking about 12, 16, some unreasonable number of APs. One of my, how am I going to ever manage to do that if my school doesn't offer those? And the answer is you're not expected to. I mean, college admissions offices are extremely adept at knowing what is available at different schools, and they understand that you take advantage of what's available to you. You can't magically, you know, take a bunch of classes that aren't offered at your school. And so this is something that's more about the tools that are available to you at your particular school, and much less about hitting some magic number or having some like, you know, it's not a competition, right? Like there's no admissions office in the country that's going to say, well, I have 2 comparable applicants, but this one took 10 AP classes and this one took 12. We're going to take the one that took 12. It's not a metric like that. It's
Mhm.
much more, there's so many more nuanced ways that admissions offices have of determining what you've excelled at and what kind of student you might be. They're not taking some like blunt instrument like how many APs did you take and thinking that that's a replacement for any other kind of measurement. So there's that. Um, and I'll also say that like there's hard boundaries to how many AP classes may be available to you depending on what your school situation is. There's also soft sort of boundaries about like what kind of person are you? Like if you're somebody, I was a band kid, and so I was involved in band. And when I was in high school, we actually it's funny. I was at my high school when they started the IB program, and they wanted me to be one of the first students in the IB program. And but the thing that they said is, well, because the scheduling's so tough for IB, you're going to have to drop band. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm in marching band, I'm in concert band, I'm in jazz band. Band is like one of the most, enjoyable things about me. It's also one of my defining characteristics that I'm like writing essays about and that I'm thinking about building my college application around. Why would I drop the thing that makes me most unique as a student in the service of a program like the IB program. And I think that same type of logic applies to APs too. Like there's if you're looking at some marginal AP that is something that is not necessarily your bread and butter, and that is something that is not something that you're counting on to really define, be a tent pole of your application. Um, that requires you to not do the thing that you love, whether it's band, whether it's theater, whether it's sports, whether it's volunteering and service. I mean, you name it. Like there's a lot of opportunities in high school, and sometimes some of those other opportunities may actually be more interesting to a college because they demonstrate other skills beyond just what normally happens in the classroom. So I'm a big believer in like it's not all APs all the time. It's not just your academic coursework. It's also your extracurriculars and fine arts and a whole bunch of other things that make you a well-rounded person, a well-rounded human being that makes you happy. Like, don't make yourself miserable because you took so many APs that you can't, you're always swamped in work and you're not able to do the things that you love. So that is the counterpoint as well. Is like there's these boundaries that exist that can control that are outside that are not something that you can immediately just discount
Mhm.
and say I'm going
Mhm.
to take more APs.
Well said, band nerd. Um,
Yeah.
and can I also add, before we move on from this slide, again, both Jesse and I have actually already in this answer taken the route of admissions, but let us also not forget the point of APs. They're there in the name, advanced placement. If you are a senior watching this, who maybe even today is getting early admissions decisions back, first of all, God bless you. Second, you can still very easily take an AP at the end of your senior year. The point of the AP is to demonstrate advanced placement in a subject so that when you hit college, you can be placed out of introductory obligations so that you can go through and probably even more easily complete the course requirements when you want to major in something. When I was at university, I had to take fewer courses than a lot of other people in my major in order to complete my major because of my APs. So that's something else to think about as you're considering. If you are towards the end of your high school career and you know what it is you want to study, if you've been accepted or you have a target, that is something else to consider as well. Okay, I think we've yacked on enough about this, right, Jesse?
Yeah. Yep.
How do I know? How do I know if my AP class is on track for the exam? Okay, now we are in the middle of we're in the dead middle of the year here. Winter break is coming up. Jesse, what would you tell a poor student shivering in the cold? It is bloody cold where I am, I'll tell you that much. But how do you know if an AP class is on track for the exam? What tools do you have at your disposal that you can proactively do?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because AP classes are they have a structure and they have a pattern that they're supposed to follow, but it's also true that like the teachers that teach AP classes are some of the most experienced teachers in their schools. They've often done this for a very long time, and they can make very conscious, very informed decisions about what pace they move at and which topics they teach when. And so sometimes
And we
there's
want that, and we want
yes.
that out of our teachers, right, Jesse? Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I'm a big believer that we're both tutors, but I mean I'm a tutor and a teacher, and I believe even as tutors we've working with teachers is the name of the game. And so your teacher could be in a lot of different places, but it's also true that there are teachers that are behind. There are teachers that haven't covered the material that they maybe should have at this point. There's and that can lead to some anxieties with students. And so what's cool is that College Board is really good about being transparent about what goes into an AP curriculum and what ends up on the test. So if you just like Google whatever AP subject you're interested in, AP physics or AP calculus or some whatever it may be, um, one of the first links that'll come up is AP Central for that class. And if you open that up and you look at College Board's website, you can get a list of exactly what the units are, exactly what topics go into each unit. And I mean, one of the first things I'll do when I start tutoring a student, especially around this time of year, is just like take out that list and start checking stuff off and saying like, what have you covered? What have you understood? What have you gotten through? And start to get a sense for where a course is, um, based on what, the total amount of material. This is also a useful skill if you're not taking a class, if you're just thinking about, okay, I'm going to take the test in the spring, but it wasn't a class that was offered, so I'm studying on my own. You can get a sense for what the totality of that course is, what are the units that are included, and where you are in the pacing on your own quite readily. And I think this is a very good thing because I think it makes the test a little bit more accessible for everybody. So the other things you can do, I mean, there's prep guides out there like the Princeton Review guides or other things. There's also tutors, of course, who can help you, other people who are experienced. And again, I'll just circle back to your teacher. If you're like, okay, I really want this test to go really well, and I'm a little nervous that it feels like we're kind of like if you think that you're in a different situation than a lot of your classmates, start having that conversation with your teacher. It at the very least shows that you're interested and motivated, and they may be able to give you advice about where in their experience you might be too. So that would be kind of my answer.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits to taking the AP class is it's not like the SAT or the ACT where the questions and the topics are deliberately hidden from you. Like, Jesse is right. You can go on to the College Board website, type in AP whatever, and there will be delivered to you a gigantic syllabus that is literally handed out to the teachers when they teach an AP class, so that what's on the test is generally understood by everybody. And they even for the histories for the government, they order them in units that they mean for you to go to through sequentially. Not everybody follows that same rubric, and that's okay. But that's absolutely something that you can follow. As well, they release past tests. There's plenty that you can see. We'll talk about them plenty in a little bit. And Jesse's right. Like, there's just a litany of resources that are available to you. Your teacher, us, other books. So there's definitely ways, if you are curious and if you want to take some control of this, you can absolutely. I'd agree with Jesse. The first place I'd point you to is the curriculum, the syllabus that's on each of the AP websites. How should I plan out my study program? If you're thinking that already, you are an overachiever. We've only gotten halfway through, but it is an interesting question to start thinking about. Um, Usually, we start working with students one on one in March, maybe even February, on reviewing some of the curriculum, especially from earlier on in the year. If you are interested in just doing question prep, we start usually beginning of April for that kind of thing. Um, Something even now that you can start thinking about is you can start to prepare some questions that you have about how are you going to structure your schedule. Jesse talked about how he was in band camp for a while, but band is not the only obligation. Like, there can be sports, there can be I was a theater kid. What's your spring going to look like? Is it going to be particularly busy? What can you do to plan out certain moments in the remainder of the school year? If you know you're going to have a really, really busy April, May, that's something that you might want to adjust even now. That's something that you might then say, okay, you know what? I'm going to be busy. There's nothing I can do about that. I'm going to lower the number of APs I'm going to take this year. Excuse me. I have a very adorable 3-year-old who passes around respiratory diseases. Um, but Jesse, like, is that something that you would also counsel your students to start thinking about even nowadays?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I second what you're saying that it's if you're a student and you're thinking about it right now, you're doing a good job of taking this seriously and wanting to make sure you're setting yourself up for success. Um, it is a good time to be thinking about this because it's right around midterms, depending on how your school works. I mean, I know midterms in some ways have gone out of fashion in a lot of schools, but if you
Mhm.
do have a midterm exam, this is a really good time for you to kind of get a capsule understanding of like how has this first half of the course kind of gone? Have I understood fairly well? Are there things as I'm going through my studying that I'm like, oh, I'm worried about this for the midterm? I mean, because I'll tell you, I mean, here's a secret. If you're worried about it for the midterm now, if you don't do anything about that, then in 4 months you're going to be worried about it for the AP exam too. And
Mm.
so, and thinking about it right now is good because everybody takes a break over the winter. You kind of shut the brain off. You're not focused on it as much. So, if you can take some notes, right now about what am I worried about, what am I studying, how am I preparing for midterms, those are notes that can be very helpful when you then come back around and are thinking specifically about AP exams.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean that we do have students this time of year. The students that we tend to work with this time of year tend to be more about midterm prep and subject knowledge if they've been struggling with specific things in the class. This is for whatever reason, this is very common in AP statistics because one of the first things you have to kind of get up to speed with in AP statistics is just speaking the language of a statistician. And anytime math combines with words, it makes life a lot harder for everybody. So yeah, there's people getting help now, but I agree generally with the timeline that Ian laid out that like where we start to see stuff pick up in terms of specifically test prep is heading more into the spring. And that means you should start thinking about, what are my what are my other obligations? What am I involved in? Am I going to Bermuda for 2 weeks in the middle of the spring, right when I want to have tutoring? These are the kinds of things that you can start to lay out because even if it's just like 5 minutes of creating a mental sketch of where you are and where you want to be, that sort of prep can help a lot when then you're starting to wonder what resources do I need to pull together? Who do I need to help me? You can have you have a little bit of time to get that started. I'm a big believer in a little bit of work over a long period of time is way better than a lot of work in a very short period of time. And so thinking about it a little bit now and starting that process is a good thing.
Now I want to go to Bermuda for 2 weeks in the
It
summer.
sounds really good to me too. I
Oh.
had a student. That's a student story. I had a student who did that. It was a little awkward because I was like, "Well, we're supposed to meet," but that's tutor talk. So
When should I start reviewing with a tutor on my own? Jesse, we kind of covered this earlier, but I think that for people who are in this, I think in this webinar, I think it's a great question. Usually, like, by no means are you anywhere near done with the course load now. Um, it's not unusual for classes to be going through units 7, 8, 9, even as you're into April, on the verge of taking the test. But Jesse, as usual, is right. I think that even starting in February, March, getting accustomed to all of the stuff that you have learned. And I will add something else in. Um, in March, and then especially in April, a really good way of starting this review is not just the topics, but making sure that you are familiar with the idiosyncrasies of the questions of the AP. Like, take the history APs, which I'm more familiar with. They're not sitting there asking you, oh, order these events in history. No, they are very writing intensive and they're very specific about the writing assignments. You have to deal with primary sources, you have to deal with secondary sources, you have to be able to connect distinct chunks of time that the units have delineated. And that's the sort of thing that come the middle of the spring, the middle of the spring term, you can really start to practice that can really, really benefit you. We think about two different things. Jesse is absolutely right. I am working with AP students right now, and I'm working with them usually on the course load. I'm helping them with their grade in class. I'm making sure that they know enough and feel confident enough that they're going and just smashing those essays, those tests. But later on, I'm also going to layer in, okay, here's like a multiple choice practice that simulates what you're going to see on the AP. Here is a Supreme Court case question that you're like to see if you're taking the AP US Gov test. So we deal with two things, and when we hold them both, the knowledge that you have to come in with, which it's, feel free to start reviewing even what you've gone over in the fall semester now, and then later on a familiarity with the test questions. Okay, Jesse, your thoughts as well?
That's perfect. You're absolutely right. I mean, especially because I'd say if there's one uh sort of line that can be drawn that is the most common sort of difference between uh different types of AP classes taught by different types of teachers. It's like whether they are using AP style materials throughout the course or not. And as a rule, College Board says, when they train AP teachers, they tell them be using AP style questions from the beginning. Use those in your tests, use those in your materials, all of that. But especially if you are in a place where you have a really old school teacher, a teacher who's been around a long time, who has materials that may come from a different version of the class, or may come from an older version of the AP exam, since they do go through revisions over the years. You may be in a situation where you have a teacher who doesn't really pepper in the sort of AP style format stuff as much. And especially true if you're like working through on your own, if you're learning from a resource that is not AP specific, if you're learning from a textbook or from a online college course or something like that, then you may be missing out on the AP style of how that particular class is tested in the exam. And yeah, that's the number one thing I notice is like I have students who it's like, oh yeah, I know what an AP free response question's like. I know how it's graded. I've been doing that since day one. And then I have students who are like, what's a free response question?
Mhm.
Literally, we've only done multiple choice exams this entire class. Like, what are you talking about? That half the test is free response. So yeah, that's those two poles are two opposing ends of the spectrum in terms of how a class is run. I You can tell from the way I'm talking that I have a certain opinion about this, about how the class should be set up. I think it absolutely should be having the test stuff in there from the beginning. But yeah, if you're in a if you're in a class where you really feel like when you glance at stuff online, again, you're your own, you have the power to go and see what these things kind of look like. You can look at past free response questions in whatever topic you're interested in. And like if you're looking at these and you're saying like these do not look like what I'm being tested on, then maybe you want to start reviewing earlier.
Mhm.
And then if instead you look and you're like, yep, sure enough, like I've even had students who it's like the second I show them a free response question, they're like, oh yeah, I had that one like on Tuesday. Like if you start looking at the free response, you're like, oh yeah, I know what this is like. This looks familiar. Then you're probably safer waiting a little bit later for some of the
Mhm.
finishing work. So
Mhm. My neck is starting to hurt from agreeing with you so much, Jesse. Um, what are AP graders looking for? Aside from long walks on the beach, someone to listen to them, Jesse, what are they looking for?
yeah, it's an anxiety inducing question because it suggests one of the things that's very interesting about this test, which is there are obviously people who grade it. I mean, in a world where so much of our standardized testing is graded, just by computers and doesn't have the human element, AP exams still do have that human element, and that means that like essentially how AP grading works is when it comes into season and everybody's taken the tests, all the AP graders will get together. They'll meet in some city in middle America that's easy for everybody to get to, and they'll sit down and there will be a chief grader whose job is to kind of communicate what the main goals were for the class that year and kind of talk about the problems overall. What were the problems geared toward and what were they looking to learn? And then the graders will start grading. And there's two kind of answers to this. One of these is a very concrete one. Every single AP exam has a set of criteria under which the questions are graded. That criteria is publicly available when you go online and you look at like a free response question. My advice would be not just to look at the free response question itself, but then once you're done, look at the scoring guidelines. And the scoring guidelines will specifically lay out how the points are allocated and what graders are looking for. That is something that varies from test to test, so I don't want to get too much into specifics, but suffice to say that we're used to thinking on a percentage basis in normal classes where like your goal is you start at thinking about 100% and then you think about the problems that you miss that kind of drop you down into an A and then a B and then a C. It's probably better to think about AP exams the opposite way. There's points and you're trying to get points. And when you go through a free response question, you are trying to accumulate as many points as possible. What that means is like even a question that you look at and you're like, I have no idea where this is going. Like
Mm,
I am not familiar with, there's clearly something I'm missing here. If you can start answering it and get some stuff down on paper, you can start accumulating some points because for all you know, the scoring guidelines that may be a 4 point question, and two of the 4 points may be something that you think is very simple, that is actually something that indicates that you know what you're talking about. And so never give up on a question. Always start by writing down what you know, writing down what you're given, and then starting to work with whatever tools you have, even if you're not sure that you're heading in 100% the right direction. Because again, there is a rubric. It does have points, and you can get a lot of those points. I mean, the difference between a 3 and a 5 isn't that you magically are like capable of getting every single point on every single question. That's not the goal on these tests. The difference between a student who gets a 3 and a student who gets a 5 is not giving up on problems.
mhm,
If you're just clean missing problems and getting 0 points on problems, that's not going to work out well. But if you're able to get even on a really hard problem 1 or 2 points along the way and kind of still get partial credit, that
mhm,
can add up. So there's a very concrete answer. The other side is there is a sort of philosophical side to this that AP graders are looking for students who have the knowledge and are clearly competent in the language of whatever discipline they're taking the test in. And so um there is sort of a holistic side to this too. But that's a little bit tougher to pin down. That's kind of the final step, I would say, in getting ready for free
mhm.
response questions. The first step is getting the points, period.
I I have been quite over the years doing this year in year out has only sort of solidified for me the feeling that even on the English, the histories, the political science, the languages ones, and I can only imagine that it is more than this, if not, or just as much as this, if not more so, for the stems. Um, there really is a formula for each one of these about how they grade them. Yes, they all get together in a room and they discuss it. It's true. It's been Kansas City in the past. Um, but they have only Jesse talked in the last question about how there might be some old school teachers, but they have like adapted some grading and some course material over time, and I find that those adaptations have only been to make these rubrics that they're looking for to grade even more of a sort of check mark. Did they achieve this piece or not? Um, and the good news behind that is that those are things that are absolutely trainable, that they are learnable. It's not just about can I answer the question, it's can I structure the essay in a way that I remember to hit this point, and that point. There, each AP indeed has its own particulars, but a uniting force behind the way the AP, I think, is graded is this. Uh, Correct me if I'm wrong, Jesse. The STEM absolutely seems like that. I can assure you, like the AP histories came under fire for being a little bit too um, up to the whims of some of the graders, and so they have taken steps to downgrade some of that actually, to the delight of many. So that seems like it's the way things are going, that they're looking for certain things, and those things are trainable, findable, researchable on the internet.
Yeah, and
And
I
big
think
company.
that's the upshot. If you're going to take a positive, it's transparent, and
Yes.
so you should never be in a position where you're like, I have no idea how this test is going to be graded. If you go back and you take a look, they have years. Every single test, well, I guess except for AP pre-calculus because it just started last year, but every other test has
Mhm.
multiple years of previous free response questions. You can go back, you can see how they were graded, and you can very quickly get you can also see sample student responses, which is very cool. So that like what kind of student response got this score, what kind of student response got this score.
Yeah, they give their explanation for all of them, saying this is why we said so and so got a point for thesis, but not contextualization, for instance.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
something that if you are comfortable, I'm always all about empowering students. If a student is feeling comfortable to starting to take a look at that, I think it's a hugely powerful resource to start building that sense of what's going on. But this is also like this is tutoring 101. Our
Mhm.
number one goal anytime we start tutoring any subject is to get a student to start thinking more like the graders, to start thinking more like the test writers, because that's sort of the meta of testing is getting to a point where you really understand, like, not just okay, this is what I know content wise, but also this is what they're looking for structurally
Mhm.
when I approach a test. So
I think we've beaten that horse. So I'm hoping that we can save some time for any and all questions that come our way. Like I said, I'll do my best. Jesse and I will both do our best to answer them. Again, we are Apple Ruth. We would love to continue these conversations. These are our offerings, and we do want to add, since this is since AP is the flavor du jour, I wanted to highlight that Apple Ruth offers these 2 hour online AP workshops. The benefit to them is they come with graded practice tests and they help students prepare for the exams. We're offering right now an exclusive webinar offer to save 75 bucks on each workshop through the end of Sunday. So workshops are normally $275, but if you register early, it's just flat 200 bucks. Please feel free to visit appleruth.com/AP for details, and to sign up if you're ready, and use the subject specific promo code when you are registering that you can find on this slide. So please do let us know. Come, one and all, with your questions. We are eager and we are waiting. There is a fascinating question, actually, to get us started. Do you have the option to share or not to share your AP scores with university by subject? Or if you submit your AP classroom transcript, will they see them all? This is a fascinating question. So, my understanding is that you can take the AP and then, which you usually do in the first 2 weeks of May. The timeline is key to this. You take the test, it'll be sometime in the first 2 weeks of May, usually. There are makeup dates towards the middle and end of May as well, if you have an excused absence or if your test overlapped with another one. So there are students who can take the latter stage, but then you have to make a call. You may um, you may have you may cancel the score altogether and say, forget it, don't grade me. Or to um, you may choose to hide a score. You have to tell the AP that you're not going to, the college board, the company that administers the AP, you have to inform them this decision before the 15th of June. And that is well before you get your grades back, usually in July. If you do that and then get your grade back and you like it, there is a process by which you can then submit and show them to colleges and universities, but it's a bit of a lengthy one with a lot of paperwork to it, but it can be done. Um, what I would suggest for the person asking is they make it clear later on that they're asking because son is taking an AP science test, even though the school does not offer AP level for that. So the suggestion is, oh, he wants to take this, but he's worried that his score might not be up to snuff. So we don't want to show any poor grade that he might get. I would actually say, hold off, don't do that. Let him take it because then the colleges and universities that view his AP transcript get to see, like, wow, he actually didn't have an AP class and yet here he is taking it. Why, that shows gumption. That shows that he's really interested in it. They don't all need to be fives. If you have like a solid smattering of fours and fives, those are usually enough. Like, check with each college and university particularly, but usually a 4 or 5 is enough for credit. Even plenty of threes can be used for credit. So a three is very much worth something. Am I right, Jesse? I don't. My instinct is don't immediately think you have to cancel a score. I think that there is some value in submitting something, especially in a situation like the questioner says.
Yes. Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I'll say like I think that the number like the one place where I can see that being particular like being actually useful is if there's some situation where there was a testing irregularity or you had an such a terrible day. If it was such a traumatic experience that you're like I need to just then I guess there's maybe some edge case there. But I'd say for like 99% of students it's in some ways are the focus on like do I get to choose which scores get sent or not is kind of putting the cart before the horse because the first thing you did was you got ready for that test and you put a lot of time and effort in and you made that decision and you went and you did it. And that is already worth a ton to colleges. It's also true that like if you think from a perspective of a college admissions office, there's like an order of operations problem here in that the first thing they do as they sift through applicants isn't like I'm going to go and individually check everybody's AP transcript. Like the first thing that they're doing is they're going through and they're reading your application and they're going through and they're seeing like what you put in there, what you told them and what you were trying to share about yourself. And like as much as like yes, I'm not advocating that you don't list a bad score necessarily. Like I think you should, put everything out there. The reality is like you're going to have an opportunity when you're putting together your application to focus on the things that were your strengths, to try and communicate those to the college that you're interested in. And also to, you've got a perfect opportunity if you had tried really hard and you got a result that you weren't totally happy with, you have a mechanism like you could talk about that in your essay. Like so many college students, like so many high school students struggle with that question of like if I'm like colleges will often ask like what's a moment that you faced adversity? And a lot of high school students will struggle to know how to answer that question. Well, if one of the things that you really struggled with is you were trying to put together another, trying to stretch and put together a really good score on something and then it didn't turn out quite the way that you wanted it to. Uh, talk about it. Say like I worked really hard, I learned a lot, it didn't turn out but here's what I learned from that experience and here's how that's going to help me be a better student in college. Because again, I said this earlier, keep in mind that like colleges are less interested in how good you are for 3 hours on a random day in March
Mm,
in May than they are in how good are you going to be over the course of 4 years at their institution.
mhm,
And so APs are really weird in that they're one shots mostly. Sometimes people will retake them, but generally speaking, you take it once, you're done. And a lot of things can happen when you take something once. There's a lot of randomness and a lot of incidents occur. I mean, so just keep in mind that like that's when you get a certain score on an AP exam, that doesn't define how you did in that class. It doesn't define how well you knew that material, and it doesn't define you as a human being or as a student or anything. It's it's contextual and holistic. College admissions is never about, oh, this student got a 2 on this exam instead of getting a 3 on this exam. I got a 2. I mean, I took AP Spanish, and I should not have taken the AP Spanish exam. I only had Spanish 3, but I wanted to try it and see if I could get out of Spanish credit in college, and, I got a 2, and I ended up going to Northwestern. I had absolutely no trouble with my application, and that ended up being a wonderful experience for me. So, just like even really strong applicants can have a bad test score, and that does not define their application, and it does not tank their ability to get into the school of their choice. So,
I hope that that helped. I understood the question to be about uh, canceling scores. Outright canceling. I think Jesse and I we would agree that outright canceling is reserved not if you like left and said, "Oh, that went terribly." Like that, canceling is reserved for if something genuinely went wrong, like the fire alarm went off in in the middle of it or something like that. Um, there is a structure when you get your AP uh your AP chart at the end. You can select which ones will be. I believe you can select
yeah, you can choose
which
which
ones
subjects are
are.
being reported. Yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, I wouldn't necessarily think about canceling or saying like don't share immediately.
And again, I think there's a lot of different sort of when you think about the game theory of choosing to say what score you got or not. I think there's a lot of reasons to still, and maybe I'm in the minority here, but still include a test score that maybe it wasn't exactly what you wanted it to be. But that's different people have different perspectives on this, I would say.
Um, Another question: will we have a session for AP Gov? Well, we did last year. I don't see why we shouldn't again. It was fun. I'm assuming you mean AP US Gov, which is the more popular one over AP comparative government. And yes, we did have one. If you wanted that, oh, you're raising your hand. Um, but if you want that, like by all means, ask us for it and we'll put it together. If enough people do, one needs a critical mass. Decisions are made by those who show up.
Well, and we should also say that there's multiple options. Apple Ruth does a bunch of stuff for APs. So what we included on the slide, like a slide ago, was specifically the workshops, which are like a one-shot 2 hour, along with with a graded practice test. We also do AP final reviews, and we tend to have a much wider spread of APs that we cover in our final reviews that are a little closer to test time.
Yeah,
It's
does
also
you
true.
you do yours sort of mid-ish April, right?
Yeah, something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And I'm usually leading the AP Chemistry, AP Statistics, and AP Physics reviews. It's also true that there we have tutors in every single subject, and so if you're in a situation where a group class or a workshop or something like that is not available, even just a quick meeting with an experienced tutor can do a lot for setting sort of your expectations and getting a plan in place and private, like we're both available, we're both active tutors. This is one of the things I love about Apple Ruth is that the people who do these webinars are not just talking heads who like we're all actively working with students. We love working with students. We would love to work with your student if you want to request to work with us. And you should always feel comfortable getting whatever amount of help your student requires. And so, this doesn't need to be something where you sign up for private tutoring and all of a sudden you're doing 20 hours worth of private tutoring. Even short little, even short meetings online can be very helpful for getting the process started. So,
I think we've reached the end of our Q&A. Jesse, in in the spirit of band, is there anything you want to say to play us off?
Um, well, I guess I touched on this a little bit. I'll just say it again that like we're here, we're tutors, we're in the test prep game. There's a lot of focus on numbers, there's a lot of focus on scores, there's a lot of focus on getting as many incremental gains as we can, because we recognize that this is stressful and it's competitive, and that for all the kids who get to go to the schools of their choice, there's also kids who feel like they don't get that. I like to think that you know college admissions is not about a prize to be won, it's about a match to be made. And the reality is there is a school out there that is the right fit for you. And so even through this whole process of thinking about AP exams and AP scores and trying to get your numbers up, you are a human being, you are a person, and there is a college out there that wants to have you on their campus. And so, sometimes the test prep game can be a little dehumanizing. I like to think that one of the great things about Apple Ruth is we try to put the human back into this process. And so just keep your chin up, work hard, you probably will. I mean, these courses are really hard. You're probably going to have some struggles along the way. There are resources out there, there are people to help, and you ultimately are going to be okay. So keep working at it, just to keep a positive attitude. The number one thing, honestly, is just having a positive attitude in this process.
Thank you all so much for coming to tonight. Again, my name is Ian. This is Jesse, and it's been a privilege to get to chat with you, to answer your questions. These are exciting, nerdy tests that we really enjoy teaching, and and with any luck, you will find that as well. Thank you. Bye bye.